Well, hello there, Apple Bites. This is your Apple Bite, Raphael Tavares, talking to you straight from our show here, The Written Writ. A show where you and I and you take a journey together to become better writers. Yes, it's time for the Written Writ Late Write, and I am here, your host, Written Writ Ralph, but my shadow is not here today. He's not feeling too well. Get better quick, Shadow Rabbit. And tonight we have the incomparable, the great, the amazing Kip, who's right there.
Talk about an introduction. You know, you can tell that you're a writer when you're throwing out the words incomparable for me. I appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, it's so funny when I'm typing up like who's on the show today. I'll be like, oh wait, he's a wrestler. Maybe we have the wrangling wrestler Kip.
I have never been called that, and I appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much for having me. This is already a lot of fun. Thank you.
Oh no problem. Yeah, we're already having fun in the green room, and we already know that anytime we're at the conventions and I run into you and Jay, it's just a free for all.
Yes, that's one way to put it, definitely.
So I was like, I'm looking forward to this. We had Jay on a little while ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I kept expecting either one of you to do something, or you come from behind with a chair or something. I was like, I know something's gonna happen.
Oh man, sorry to disappoint. Yeah, hitting Jay with a steel chair would be nice, and he's not gonna do it tonight. But one day maybe we'll have to do a battle royale live at a convention.
Oh my god, I can see that happening. It's like you two just talking in the table behind. All of a sudden, what are you doing? What are you doing? Ah!
But Lord knows I'd be the one to jump off the table. he might have me in the power, but I'll have him on the daredevil ability.
Oh my god, you guys are fantastic. I love running into you guys. You guys are a great duo. Let me ask you this: what made you go into wrestling?
That's a fun life story right there. So people always say I want to do this since I was a kid, since I was younger, but I never had that dream. And it wasn't because I didn't love wrestling. I was just very realistic. I was always the shortest person in my class. I was always very skinny. I was always picked on all the time. So even though I loved wrestling, it was something like I never thought of as a possibility. And then on top of it, like, it wasn't like wrestling schools were like promoted really. Like I just thought Hulk Hogan was the best fighter in the world. You know, Ultimate Warrior came from another planet to wrestle. Like that, I never thought of it as this is something that normal human beings do.
Makes sense.
I think the first wrestling school I ever heard of was the ECW one, and even that I was just like, oh my god, I can't go there. That's the scariest place in the world. But I went to a Ring of Honor show late in 2005. That was the first ever time I ever went to an independent wrestling show. And for those of you who aren't like well versed in wrestling, like I knew WWE, I knew WCW, I knew like the big promotions that were on TV, but I never knew it on the small independent level. And that was the first show that I went to, and it was a blast and a half. And then I started seeing people that weren't much bigger than me, weren't taller than me. They were just guys that I related to. And there was one wrestler on that show called Colt Cabana, and I implore you to watch him. He is somebody who would like break the fourth wall of wrestling. He would kind of wink at the fact that this is all predetermined. And it was almost like he was doing a comedy show within a wrestling match. And I always was like, I can never be Hulk Hogan, I can never be Triple H, but this guy I relate to. And from there, I would go to more and more independent wrestling shows and be like, oh my God, like, this is something I could possibly do. And then I went to a trade show. I was working there with somebody as a vendor, helping him out. And there was a wrestling school there, NYWC. And, I saw they had a table, talked to a couple of guys, and then I was talking to the champion, and he was like, hey, you should come to one of our shows. And I don't know what prompted me to have the courage to ask, but I was just like, it'd be really cool if you had a school. I would love to try this. And instead of him laughing me off, he goes, yeah, well, it looks like you have a lot of heart. Yeah, if you ever want to do this, give it a shot. Come to our school. I was like, what? You didn't tell me no? And I went to the school. at the time, two of their students just got signed to WWE, made their debut, Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. And it was like, all right, so this place is reputable. ECW legend Mikey Whipwreck, had an affiliation with the school. At the time, people who were on AEW right now, like Trent Beretta, was at the school. Tony Nese, who was just recently with WWE, was at the school at the time. Alex Reynolds, John Silver, and I was just like, you know what? I'd much rather give it a shot now, and if I fall on my face, but at least I could say I tried.
True.
And then, God knows how many years later, probably 12, 13 years later, I'm still doing it. So, long answer to a short question, but it was one of those things where I had to go for it, and I did.
Well, that's a perfect answer because, you actually went through the process, your mind process of going, I want to do this. How am I going to do this? And like, look, there's my chance. And you actually took your chance. That's a pretty good story there.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like, there was plenty of growing pains, literal and figurative in the world of wrestling. But, it was cool. Like, just setting little goals, like, oh man, it was just to like get through one of the cardio sessions. It was just to like make sure I could learn how to hit the ropes properly. And, then it was like have a mini match and then have a match. And that was the funny thing. Like my original goal in wrestling was just have one match, because that would be something that can never be taken away from me. And then, doing that, you just set the goals a little bit higher and higher. But, like, it's pretty amazing, like the stuff I got to do. I'm truly blessed and lucky and fortunate, and I think the thing I'm proudest of right now is the fact that I still love wrestling, and that I haven't become jaded and just like, oh, how come this didn't work out? Like, oh, I don't care. Like any show I'm happy to be a part of, and I'm like, it's a pleasure to be a part of any show. It really truly is like a blessing. It's something I always remind myself. Like I could have been somebody who never made it to a show, and let alone now I'm I'll get to be a part of many shows, which is
you're involved in everything. Yeah, it's amazing. I like the way you're thinking, because it's a good way to make your goals happen. If you're moving your goals as you get to them, going, well, I did this finally, so let's move the goal over here. Let's do this. Let's move the goal over here. Let's do this. It's a very nice way of getting your goals in there, setting things up. As a writer, that's one of those things that I try to do, is like, all right, so today I'm going to write this much, or I'm going to tell this story. And then, as you get there, you keep broadening the horizon so that you can actually like reach the goals as you reach them. And, it also gives you like this feeling of accomplishment.
Oh, definitely. And what's funny is like, we're both storytellers in different ways. Like you're doing it with words, I'm doing it with actions. But, when I'll like try and think of a promo, I'll always think of like, all right, here's an idea, but like, let's build on it a little bit more. And like, what is the purpose of what I'm saying? And there's a saying in wrestling, where's the money at? Like, what am I trying to express with this promo? And anything. And then I think about it in a match, like, what am I trying to express with this match? Like, what is my ultimate goal? And it's crazy how you can go granular to the bigger picture. And that's the same thing with how you explained with your writing process. Starting off granular, it could be just one paragraph, and it could be just verbal vomit. Just, I'm just going to write whatever comes to my brain. And then it could be one little line in there, that little paragraph that sticks. And you're like, this is something I can build from. And then you keep going further and further and further. And it's kind of funny because sometimes I'll just have an idea of, I want this finish, or I want this moment to be in the match. Now let's figure out where we can put it in the match and what we can build around it, or how do we get to there. It's a fun process when you can put things like that.
Well, it's always amazing. I've always loved wrestling. A lot of people like would call wrestling a soap opera for men, because pretty much you're watching these guys and there's always this story going on, and you're like, ooh, what's going to happen next? And why are they angry at each other? And what's going on? And wait, oh my God, he betrayed him. And you're like, and it's, I've always thought it was an amazing process to see these stories that they had as they're doing these wrestling matches, because, it becomes more about, oh, there's something else happening than, oh, look, they're fighting each other.
Yeah, well, first off, I used to like to joke The Office was the ultimate soap opera for men the first few seasons. But yeah, and again, like I don't look at that as an insult either when people would say that. But I always looked at it like I never liked the whole soap opera for men. No, I just wanted it to be a great story, and I didn't care if you were a man watching or a woman watching,
Bingo.
or a little kid or an adult. It's like I wanted to just always have my character and my matches translate and be entertaining no matter who you were in the crowd. And that's always a fun challenge too, because all right, I could be, super well known in this one promotion, but then I go to the state of Delaware and I have to reestablish it. And I have to figure out like what works in what company and what works for another. You joked with me, we got to make this a G-rated show today. But, there's some places that I go to where there was a place in Washington, D.C. I wrestled in, and it was in a brewery. And a lot of the people there weren't necessarily wrestling fans. They just wanted to like come out, drink some fun beer, and cheer and boo random people and just have fun. They didn't care. And that was great because it was more of an R-rated crowd. So I would work in little situations where I'd go back and forth, take a cheap shot, and then flip off the crowd, and they would just boo the heck out of me. But it was great because that was the desired reaction that I wanted. And then would have a turnaround on me at the right away after that, and everybody would go crazier because finally I was getting my comeuppance. How about that for a word, Mr. Ryder?
Good word there, comeuppance. I love that one. Very few people use that one.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing. Like that story that I told in that Washington D.C. promotion. I probably couldn't do it for this promotion on Long Island VPW because they're more family friendly.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to, betray that with that crowd. I'd want to save those moments for the right crowd and the right situations.
Well, that's good. I like the fact that you're always keeping in mind where you are and what you're doing. I feel like that, that makes you a better character. It lets you become who you are at the moment, whether you're one tough nerd or if you're Evil Kip. Speaking of which, Sebastian Bonet is like, hey, Kip. And he's also saying, going to make Kip Stevens a guest character in a comic book one day.
You see, Sebastian's doing it all wrong. I need to be the star if that's going to be the case.
And he also says, wrestling is like real life comics. I tend to agree there. I've always found it surprising that nobody's actually sat there and made a great wrestling comic book, because you have so much that you can work with there, especially, they're technically superheroes.
Yeah, well, this is where I will praise Jay Hewer for making my origin story. That was in a comic book, the Kayfabe Anthology, Volume 3. So if you find that somewhere and purchase it, support all the artists in there. And there is a wrestling comic. I don't know if it's still in promotion, print. I think it was called Headlocked.
Yeah, Headlocked is pretty good. I know the guy who does this stuff, and I love all the stuff that he writes in there.
Yeah, and the issues that I read, I think it was consistency that hurt it more than anything. But he had the right idea, which was nice. And here's another plug for somebody who doesn't need it, but there was a wrestling announcer named Tony Schiavone, and he's, recently had a resurgence. Like, he was out of wrestling for about 20 years.
Right.
And he was, the joke was the voice of your childhood in a lot of ways, especially if you were a WCW fan. And when WCW went out of business, WWE told him, no, we're not interested. And he swore off wrestling, was out of the game. Then he started doing a wrestling podcast recently, and he wasn't even going to do it. Conrad Thompson, who does millions of podcasts, convinced him, no, like, people will genuinely want to hear your story. And that's what got him back into it. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, AEW starts and they use him as an announcer. So that's a long story short of Tony Schiavone. But what's cool is, instead of writing an autobiography, he loves comic books and he loves superheroes. And he did a Kickstarter for, his, autobiography in comic book form. And they had a goal. They were like, let's just, put it at, I think it was like 10,000. Like, maybe we could sell a couple of these. And their Kickstarter generated over $100,000.
Yeah, they shattered that thing. I'm friends with Dirk Manning, and he was talking about this book, and all of a sudden that thing just blew up, and we were like, whoa. I
would love to meet Dirk Manning and have a conversation with him.
He's great.
I supported the Kickstarter, and I'm excited to read it when it
Same
comes
thing.
out.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's.
I even got the little ash can.
Oh, really, man? You went above and beyond for them. But that's where we talk about, like, where wrestling can be a great comic book, and not only that, the fans see what's in front of the curtain, but
Exactly.
what's behind the curtain is a whole other story.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is great about wrestling. It's that you could be a super fan who wants to know everything, or you could just be somebody who just watches it casually. But either way, there's a great story for both sides.
So speaking of stories, then, how did you come up with One Tough Nerd? I thought it was a great concept as soon as I saw it. I saw the merchandise when you're hanging out with when Jay at the table. And I saw it looks great. The T-shirts look great. It's such a great idea. As a nerd, I love the fact that you're out there being the tough nerd, because I remember being bullied in school because I was a nerd. So, and that just, like, it speaks to me.
Oh, I appreciate that. So this will go back to the origin story a little bit. I struggled a lot in wrestling training. No, it was one of those things where everyone was like, first they hated me, but then they begrudgingly started respecting me because they saw I wasn't giving up. But it was one of those things where they were like, look, he's trying as hard as he can, but they just didn't think I was going to make it. But I was hanging around no matter what. And then the promoter, Shane O'Neill, was like, hey, we're thinking about making you a nerd character. Because, again, I'm small, wasn't developed muscularly at all, not really coordinated. So it was kind of like, put a character on this guy, and even if he's like a bumbling buffoon, at least within the character, it kind of makes sense.
Okay.
And, and some people could take that as an insult, but I looked at it as like, okay, it kind of gave me a goal and direction. So they just said, we're going to make you a nerd. Now, they didn't tell me anything else besides that. So that was where, again, character development, like, okay, I got to do some world building here. What am I going to wear? What am I going to come out to? And it was just everything. And at the time, I had shorter hair, so I grew it out a bit. I was like, I should come out to the ring with a bow tie, suspenders, go over the top. And then as a joke for my first match, like, I had a bunch of song ideas, and then for some reason they played Notorious B.I.G. Hypnotize. They were just like, let's see, just to mess with me. And the joke was on them, because then what I did was I started dancing to the ring and acting like, swiveling my hips, and then everybody thought it was hilarious.
It sounds great.
Yeah, and the match, I was with, I'll give him credit, his name is Papa Don. He led me through the match like $1 million. And when I came through the curtain, everyone was like, what the heck? Like, everything you've done up to this point, like, no, we did not expect that. And from there, it was all about evolution of the character. It was like, okay, I would do not much, just, being over my head all the time, but, can somehow still survive. But then as my skills started growing, my, everything else started developing too, I started getting more and more intense matches. The matches would go longer. I bust out a little bit more moves. Then what really solidified the One Tough Nerd thing is I had a street fight with a wrestler named Dickie Rods, and it was a bloodbath. We were brawling around the building. I was bleeding incredibly. I climbed up the top of like this utility, like storage closet. I jumped off of that, through a table, and that was like the end of the match. And then the fans started chanting One Tough Nerd. And I was like, well, I think I have an idea for a t-shirt. And it was one of those things where, like, that was like the next level of like, okay, like, I'm going to stand up to bullies. Like, I don't care. I'm a nerd. I'm embracing it. I'm loving it. I'm happy with who I am, but I'm not going to be belittled by anybody anymore. And it was one of those moments where it's like, I'm going to keep on, clawing and scratching, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I might only go an inch further than I was the day before, but I'm going to work as hard as I can to get that inch, And it was just something that the fans really latched onto. And a lot of times, like, that's a smart thing, is when you listen to your audience like that, like, okay, they think I'm the one tough nerd, I'm going to be the one tough nerd and give it to them.
Well, that's life, you know. I really like that. It's almost like the whole life story, especially when you're a nerd or something like that. You know, you actually have to do exactly what you're saying. You got to claw yourself each inch in order to get to where you gotta go, because you got all these people against you.
Yeah, and one thing I was really blessed to do is, like a lot of times, especially with my age group and stuff like that, like we want to impress like wrestling fans, but my character was always for the kids, and I always looked at it like that, and it kind of reminded me of like why I started watching wrestling when I was 7 years old, so I kind of like that my character was for them, and it was kind of this is going to sound very sanctimonious and a little egotistical, but I was like always thinking like I am making a good impression on these little kids, and you know it was always cool getting messages from people, but like when parents would message me and telling me like, "Hey, you're my kid's favorite wrestler because you stand up for yourself," and that's something that we appreciate as a parent. I was like really blown away by that,
Yeah.
and I am definitely not a big star by any means, but the fact that like some parent went out of the way to tell me that was like an amazing privilege, and it was something I never took lightly. And it was always cool, like to always send that message, like, "Hey, you can do anything you want to. You can believe. You just gotta believe in yourself a little bit." And sometimes I have to remind myself of that too in real life situations.
Well, yeah, it's a good way to think about it, you know, especially, you know, you got this motivation, and and you're doing this motivation for other people. And I know we tend to do this all the time. Sometimes we forget where we're going, how we being motivated. You know, it's such a, like you were just saying, you forget. Wait a minute. I'm doing this, so I can do this.
Yeah, it's wild, and like I said, when you have like, I remember like anytime like I would look in the crowd and see a poster made for me, I was like, wow, like it's extremely flattering because I trust me, I did not force somebody to do that. Somebody took time out of their day to show their support for me. It was just like mind blowing and flattering. And then like again, with the fun thing about the One Tough Nerds, it always evolves. Like if I do it now on shows, like I like to be as wacky as possible.
Right.
Like just like the more over the top I can be, the funner it is. And like that's what's great about it. Like again, when you create something from nothing, it's art. And every time like we have a blank canvas, you have a blank Word documents, plugging Word, or oh there we go. Or in this case, my canvas is literally the wrestling ring and the canvas on it. And some matches I might want to be a little bit more intense, and other ones I might want to be a little bit more wacky. And even there, like with that little picture displayed, me just having a fun little like for a promo photo, like
Yeah, see, it's funny. You were just talking about this, and I saw the picture. I was like, wait a minute. I remember he's all like, and it was great. So I was like, let me put it up here, and it proves your point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the funny thing too. It's like my character could be in over his head in every match, but I'm still gonna face the challenge head on and do it, as bravely as I possibly can.
Yeah, and people love that. Like Mr. Poppin' Twist. It's my good friend Muscles.
Muscle. Hold on, I'll even put up a boom boom trying to get a dildo belt. I just saw Mr. Poppin' Twist at this show actually, and yeah, and it was great. Kind of like the conventions, bumping into good friends like yourself, and
oh yeah,
there, Poppin' Twist will come out to wrestling shows, and he's a really great dude, really great friend, a Vikings fan, but no one's perfect. And one of my favorite things is he made one of the One Tough Nerd balloons for me, and my goodness gracious, that was flattering as well. Again, he did not have to do that, but he took time out of his day and created a masterful art piece. So thank you for that, Poppin' Twist.
oh yeah, Poppin' Twist is amazing. I love the balloons he comes up with are just like, oh, and having him do one of you must be like, oh my god, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's mind blowing because again, like talking about art and artists and how again the comic book story about me and just create something from nothing. Like he does amazing work, and he's done for amazing people too. Like he's done for incredible wrestlers. I've seen him do his Mick Foley collection.
Mm-hmm.
I am nowhere near Mick Foley in any way, shape, or form, but to say that I'm part of his roster of wrestlers he made, like that's very flattering for me.
Oh, that is definitely, and you're right. I've seen him do the other wrestlers, and it's amazing. Oh, wait. He's answering you. Here we go. It's my honor to use my skills to show appreciation for yours. Tommy Too is such a great guy.
Yeah, and that's like another great pleasure of wrestling is that I've got to meet somebody as cool as him as well along the way.
So you get the one tough nerd. You're pushing him forward. You're doing your thing. How do we get Evil Kip?
All right, so I'll give the long story on that one too. My answer is always going to be long-winded. I apologize.
Yeah, don't worry about it. You're very entertaining.
So along the way, I got myself into really good shape, and there was every now and again I'd help out with ring crews and try and get on shows. And there was a show called Rescue Mania that was run by former WCW superstar Crowbar.
Okay.
And one thing he said to me was, I don't want you to be the nerd character. If you have a pair of just generic trunks, just like to have you on, just be a generic wrestler. I was like, okay. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all out. So I, got a pair of black trunks, and then I got a nice spray tan, and it was the first time people really saw my body, and they were like, oh my God, what have you been covering up? You're an idiot. And then, somebody, we took a promo photo, and then, it got released, and then, a promotion that I was wrestling for up in Connecticut called Blitzkrieg Pro. I was in a tag team called the Breakfast Club with CPA, and they were like, hey, we think we're going to break you guys up. And it was just I wasn't looking for that. And they were like, and we're thinking about making you the bad guy. I was like, and I was never a bad guy ever in my career. And I was like, okay. I felt like it was something that I shouldn't say no to. You kind of again, it was just a new challenge. So I did that. And then I was like, well, what is this character going to be? And then we got to go right back down to, the foundation. So I always thought of One Tough Nerd as very colorful. I'd always have color coordination, strip down the colors, just straight black and white.
Right.
I was very loud and, very energetic in the ring. I wanted just a slow, deliberate walk to the ring. My music had a lot of energy to it. I changed my music to Phil Collins' Against All Odds because I wanted a song that you can't even clap to. Just something it was either going to be that or Gary Jules' Mad World. I wanted just something very...
Oh, yeah. I can see that, man. You can't really...
Yeah. And that was it. I wanted everything very muted. And one thing, I don't want to say that it annoys me in wrestling because, everybody's their own artist. But everyone always thought, oh, when One Tough Nerd turns bad, it's going to be like the bad nerd and stuff like that. I'm like, no, I want to do something a total 180 degrees different. And a lot of times, you'll see a wrestler turn bad, but they're doing pretty much the same stuff.
Right.
And I just was like, no, I wanted to be very, very different. Even different moves, different intensity, different everything. And there's going to be, of course, some, Venn diagram, mix in the middle. But
right.
I really wanted everything to be different. And then even with my Twitter things, I was always very positive, but then I was putting out mean things. But I was like, how do I make this, people should know that it's in character. So then I just put Evil Kip as a joke. And then I'm like, that's what I should call myself, Evil Kip. And
it's so that's brilliant.
Yeah, and even my trunks are based on the band Oasis. They're my favorite band of all time, and I love their logo where it was just no frills, black and white, all over caps, Oasis. Almost here's what we are, and we're gonna wow you. And that was kind of you know what, I like that idea. Just have a little bit of myself in there. Just here's who I am. I don't care what I have to do. I'm just gonna win. That's it.
Right.
So that was really what I wanted to do. And that's been a fun trip. An aggravating, people get really angry with me. And it's sad at times because I have to, be that bad guy. Like I said in, How to Flip Off the Crowd on a show. I joke at my merch table. That's probably the most entertaining thing I do. If I'm Evil Kip, I'm insulting you the whole time. You're walking by me, I'm just insulting you. Because I was like, if you don't buy a shirt, then I want the equity of you booing me louder at the next show that I'm on. And even if somebody does buy a shirt, I'm like, oh, you're an intelligent person. And then I'll be like, well, I always take a picture with the person. And what I'll do is I'll hold the shirt in front of their face. This way you can't see them. And I'll be like, yep, well, you got your picture with me. And just those little things where people are just like, what a jerk. Like, even when you're supporting me, I'm still being a jerk to you. It's all like little things that I feel like go into making a fun character.
That's pretty good. It goes back to the whole, having these characters, staying in these characters, because some people will just jump out of it automatically and do whatever they're going to do. And then the other thing I gave you credit for, and I always wanted to know why you went in this direction. Now you told us, because you're telling the truth. One Tough Nerd and Evil Kip are two totally different characters. It's not the evil version of One Tough Nerd. It's a whole other thing. And I was wondering if you did that on purpose, and now I got the answer.
Yeah, and it's like I said, definitely a challenge, but that's the whole part of growing as a performer. You have to step out of your comfort zone a lot of times. And like I mentioned, I was never a bad guy wrestler. And it's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different attitude going into how you want to put together a match and what my goals are. It definitely took me out of my comfort zone. But what's been a really great compliment is how many promoters say, "Oh no, we want Evil Kip." I'm like, really? You want that guy? But and again, it's extremely flattering. I'm at Creative Pro Wrestling, creativeprowrestling.com. That's my home promotion right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that even Ryan Myers, Kurt Hawkins, he wanted me to be Evil Kip there. He was like, it's really cool to get compliments from him saying encouraging me to be this character. It makes me feel like I'm taking steps in the right direction. And I don't believe I would have had my WWE matches if I didn't showcase what becoming Evil Kip.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's funny that you say that because I was about to say actually that Evil Kip seems to be ahead of One Tough Nerd right now, because I see you're all over the place as Evil Kip. So you're there you go, the whole popularity is there.
Yeah, it's either way. It's like I said to any promoter who might be listening, besides book me, I'll do either character. It's whatever the company feels they need for a show. So for VPW, they have me as One Tough Nerd because they're very family friendly. And Long Island for years I was the nerd character. The kids know, a lot of the kids will know me as the nerd character, and I have fun with it. And it's an honor or privilege to do that. But then again, more places that have a little bit more of a that 18 to 40 demographic, so to speak.
Crowd,
yeah, they'll want somebody with a little bit more of an edge. And not that I can't do One Tough Nerd with a little bit of an edge, but as Evil Kip, then it's all right, cool. I can kind of do whatever I want, and they know they're gonna get a good match, and they know I'm gonna make sure I get the crowd off their seats and angry, which is good. The last thing you want is silence, and there's never gonna be silence with me in the ring.
I have to admit, it's freeing and challenging because you're playing these two totally different characters. I give you credit for that, because it's hard to do. That's why I feel like a lot of wrestlers, they just play themselves evil, because, it's easier to do that than it is to I got to remember that One Tough Nerd is this, and I got to remember that Evil Kip is this. That takes some work.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. And again, as with anything, there's going to be growing pains. And I would imagine but again, if you're a writer, everybody could write a superhero story, but do you want to always write superhero stories? No, sometimes you want to write something a little bit different. Yeah. The Walking Dead and Invincible are two totally different books, but Robert Kirkman's still a great writer, and those are two very different stories, which is, and again, you could see just because they both make for great TV shows as well. And that's great. If Kirkman wants to stay in the zombie lane, he could have. If he wants to stay in the superhero lane, he could have, but he didn't. Brian K. Vaughan's another great writer, and he's always writing something different. And you know, that those were something like when I was really heavy into reading comic books. Those were like the two of the writers that really stuck out to me, is because it was always like something unique from them.
And that's the whole thing. Sometimes we need to challenge ourselves. You know, sometimes we want to step outside of that box. Sometimes we want to just do something different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's all. That's what's everything about being creative is all that stuff. Pop and Twist did say, "You are a valued member of the Pop and Twist Club."
It's just like the Bullet Club, only with balloon animals.
Exactly. Oh, he's such a blast. Every time we run into him in one of the conventions, it's so much fun to see what he's up to, what he's doing.
And you want to talk about somebody too, like we're gonna put over Pop and Twist a little bit more. He's somebody who, all right, he has the balloon animals, which are amazing, but he's also like a very colorful person. Like he has that great shirt that he wears.
Oh, definitely.
And he's not just, you know, Dave the Balloon Guy. No, he's Mr. Pop and Twist, and he brings that character to life too. So it's not just the balloons; he's also a character doing the balloons, which is something I always appreciate with him as well.
I think that's the whole thing, you know, and I feel like that's what we all do. You know, the written me is one version, and the other me is another version. You know, and I have to admit, like, you know, that when I'm doing the written, it's this boisterous guy who, you know, talks in a certain voice, and it gets tiring, you know. And then people run into me, and I'll be Ralph, and they'll be like, "Wait a minute, but you're that's not how you are. You're like this." Like, yeah, I get that, you know. But you know, I can't be that all the time. That's tiring.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine doing that introduction, you know, all the time. That'd be, you know, very Shakespearean of you, but you know.
You know, and that's what it's funny because, you know, that you say that, because I get that from. I know you know, like you're saying, we get all this especially from wrestling, because, you know, I remember being a kid and being wrestling, and Mean Gene Okerlund, and, you know, I love these announcers. And what I ended up happening as I grew up was, like, I took bits and pieces of the people that I loved the most, you know, like Howard Cosell, or oh, all these voice actors or hosts who do their shows. And if you pay attention, you'll see a little bit of a lot of them in my intro.
That's awesome. And that's what we all do. Like, you know, in wrestling, you know, we always pull from other wrestlers to create our, I always say it's like creating a stew. You're always picking up your little ingredients.
Yeah.
And your little influences right there. And it's cool that you do that. And again, like, not only hosting a podcast, but also as a writer, I'm sure that you have plenty of like influences you pick up from for that. So I'm going to throw a question at you. Who are some of your influences as a writer?
It's funny because I started off as, when I was a young kid, I started reading Encyclopedia Brown, which is a kid's detective book. You know, I don't know if a lot of people remember it, because every time I throw it out there, it's like, Encyclopedia Brown, what is that, Ralph? Some people go, hey, I know what that is. But it was a detective book, and that led me to more detective stories, and I love detective stories. And the first thing I wrote was a detective story with my character Maximus T. Jones, because he had to have a detective name. And of course, that led to me to reading Sherlock Holmes, Nancy Drew, all that stuff. And that early stuff, that detective noir, that the whole thing influenced the biggest part of my writing.
Oh, that's awesome. And I like how you threw in Nancy Drew as well. You weren't just sticking to one gender on that as well. And I always say that to the students too, like, you know, just watch as much as you can. And a wrestler who I just had a really great match with, Aaron Rourke, he's somebody who, like me, would like watch women's matches too and still like get ideas, because he loved Charlotte Flair. And I'm like, oh wow, like, you know, here I am loving Ric Flair. He's loving his daughter, but that's the whole thing. Like, we're still grabbing those influences where we can.
Exactly, because, you know, you don't know where you're going to get inspired from. You know, it's if it's a guy, if it's a girl, it doesn't matter. Is it a good character? That's all we need to know. You know, because if it's a good character, it's going to influence you. You know,
exactly.
Even writers, I feel like sometimes they're like, I'm going to write a female character, but I'm going to do this and this and this. I'm like, dude, just write a good character. You write a good character. That's all you really need to do, whether it's female or male. You know, if you write a good character, you're going to have a good book.
So this is something that this is where it's getting a little back and forth, which I like. one of my trainers, Mike Mondo, would talk about when we're doing matches and things like that. And he would always say, you have to remember who's in the crowd. It's Mr. and Mrs. Walmart. And he would say that in a sense like, we're trying to like think outside the box, trying to think of clever stuff. But meanwhile, like the people who are watching aren't necessarily like, we're the ones who are super obsessed with wrestling.
Exactly.
We have to simplify it for them. And it was always like a good guiding principle to have. Like you could recite the whole alphabet, but really if you only need to do ABC, that's all you need to do. So the way you're saying that with developing a character too, I would imagine it's the same thing. Like I'm sure people get bogged down in the details sometimes. Meanwhile, you can like, no, but if you just write a really good basic character that Mr. and Mrs. Walmart could latch onto, that's really all you need sometimes, I would imagine.
I completely agree with you, and I feel like we're having these we're having these writers now writing these female characters, and they're I feel like they're going overboard writing these female characters when you just need to write a good heroic character or a good villainous character. Instead of going, well, I'm going to make this female character just this perfect type of character. I'm like, it doesn't work for guy heroes. Why would it work for female heroes? Or why would it work for female villains? Or why would it, you know what I'm saying? I'm like,
no, you know what, too? I always found this, like, and I'm not saying this is for all characters, but for some reason, when people write a female character, they want to give them, like, some sort of trauma. Like, which is weird. Like, not every woman, had to, like, almost got raped at a party. Like, no, there could be just normal women who are just doing great things,
Exactly, yeah.
And it's kind of crazy, but like for some reason there's always like that crutch, and I don't know why it seems for some reason to be more gender biased on that.
It's funny that you say that, because I was talking to a fellow writer, and I was like, dude, if I did that for a guy, the guy would look weak.
Yeah.
So why would it work for a girl?
Exactly. It's crazy, and it doesn't have to be that way. All you have to do is just have a great story, and it doesn't matter what the gender is. If it's a great story, it's a great story.
Exactly. And one of my writing teachers told me that you should be able to pull the gender out and it still be the same story. So whether it's male or female, it's still the same story.
That's great. Yeah, and like the same thing going back to wrestling matches, like if it's a good build up and a good story, like it, and the matches, like the execution's on point, doesn't matter. One of my favorite matches, and I was lucky enough to see it in person, was at NXT Brooklyn, and it was between a character named Bayley and a character named Sasha Banks. And the build-up was so perfect. You had Sasha Banks, who was very egotistical. The champ would call herself the boss. Her poop doesn't stink, would carry herself with arrogance. And then you had Bayley, the person who, I don't want to say was floundering, but was just had that, like, I'm just happy to be here. And even if she lost, it was okay, because, who cares? I'm still living my dream. But then she started winning. And when she finally challenged, that was the whole thing. It was the boss saying, you're never going to top me. You're never going to be at my level. And her saying, no, I'm going to go for this. And they let it, the whole buildup was there, and the match was excellent. And then when the plucky underdog finally got her day, the place went ballistic. And exactly. And it didn't matter that it was two females. The story was what mattered. And on top of it, both those ladies killed it in the ring. They were doing amazing. The match was just phenomenal. And like when people ask me some of my favorite matches, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that one. And it was great being there in person. Like when I think about matches I've seen live, like that, I don't know if it's my top one, but it's up there because everything they put into it. And that's what's great about, like, both of us being in storytelling medium. It's, yeah, you could write a single issue, that's okay. But if you like build it up, and then you have that one page where it all comes together, like there's probably no greater feeling for you. And like that's for me in a wrestling match. Like if we go into there and there's a little bit of a storyline, and then we told some good promos, and then like it just coalesces into an awesome match. There's no greater feeling.
Completely true. You love it when it all comes together. It's just amazing. You sit there and you go, oh, okay, what's this? And then those are the stories where I sit there going, okay, maybe I got something here. When you get excited about something, when you're looking at something, because as a writer and I know as a creator, sometimes we go, well, that wasn't that good. But then you look at your audience and they're like, oh my God, Ralph, oh my God, Kip, that was amazing. When you did this and that, and you're like, okay. So I've experienced both ends of the spectrum. I mean, like when you're like, oh, that's great, and then somebody else is like, oh, that was great, and you're like, okay, I'll take it.
And you know what's funny too, and I'm sure you get the same thing. You probably learn more from things that miss the mark just as much too.
Oh, definitely. The stuff that fails has helped me become a better writer, because it helps you craft your story better, because now you know, well, that didn't work, so let's try this.
Yeah, and then the reverse engineering of why didn't it work, and that's the stuff that
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God, and that's the stuff that makes you depressed, but but it does make you stronger.
Oh, definitely. All you need to do is make sure you come through it, and you'll come through it on the other side a much stronger person. Each one of these little things that we go through build character,
And that's what we're all about.
Exactly. Yep. As a writer, you want to build character. As a person, you want to build character. As a wrestler, you want to build character.
And be a character.
Exactly. That's the fun part of life, is sometimes just be that character. Because everybody wants you to stay in this mold, and that's all they want you to do. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't be in that mold.
No, and like that's what's great about you and I, is that we have that creative outlet. Like, I can't tell you, like I can't. It was always a joke from one of my trainers, and when he said that, I'm like, oh yeah, he's 100% right. He always says, you have your life before you started wrestling and then after you started wrestling. And it's true. Like, I can't picture what my life would have been like without it. And I'm sure it's the same way for you. Like, you can't picture what your life would be like if you didn't have that medium to like express yourself in some way.
Yeah, no, if I wasn't a writer, it would be a much darker life.
Yeah. I think we would just be in a bowling league.
No. I've pictured the whole. I say, of course, as a writer, you start going. So what if, of course, especially because what if is happening now. What if I wouldn't have become a writer? Which direction would I have gone? And I can see it as clear as day, because I already knew what happened in high school and in junior high, and which direction I was going in. And if I didn't have that outlet of writing, it would have been really bad.
Oh, well, we're glad we have you on the writing team then.
Oh my God, yeah. It would have been Evil Ralph instead of. Oh my God, it would have been a really dark path.
At least I get paid to be evil.
Exactly. So that's the fun part. You're evil and you get paid to be evil. That's great.
Yes, and I'm going to make it known my rates are higher for Evil Kip. That's not true. That's not true, but I'll just take more money if you want to give it to me.
That's just what it is, man. Capitalism is evil, according to some people. Oh man, no, but it's a blast. All this stuff, it must be amazing to be in something that you were so passionate of as being a kid, and able to like now be what you used to be able to watch.
Yeah. Again, taking it back to the beginning of this conversation, it was something that I never thought possible. I didn't know how. It was just one opportunity that was there, and I took advantage of it. And every now and again, not every day is great. Trust me. You wake up in pain, or there was no worse feeling than, you drive like 4.5, 5 hours to someplace, you have a match, and the match stinks. And then you didn't sell any merch, and then you drive back that same drive. In the middle of the night, you're hungry and tired, and you have to like weigh that on your head. Like, that stinks. Wow. But yeah, there's a brutal feeling. But then like there'll be times where I'll help out somebody with something at training and see them grasp it and grow a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Or even just like I'll be sitting on the top turnbuckle and I'll like remind myself, there was a time where you were never in a wrestling ring, but now you're sitting up on the top turnbuckle. Like, oh yeah, this is like cool. Just the fact that I can be in there. Yeah, you can go you can go even just granular as that, or just like, me when I hit the ropes sometimes, just like, blow myself up a little bit and just like attacking the ropes and like, man, there was a time where I couldn't do this at all. Like there's so many like little things that I get to like be grateful for. And then again, like, you know, the smaller level, like anytime I get invited to a show, it's like, wow, this is a cool feeling. And then being able to have done stuff for WWE is just like the holy crap of it all. Like things that were never supposed to happen, but you know, perseverance, luck, you know, it did. And now it's time to set the goals a little bit higher and let's see what else I can do.
I completely feel you, because when I was a kid, I took boxing, and being in that ring was an amazing feeling, especially when the little wrestler in you would be like on that third rope going, oh my God, this is the third rope, you know, this is what the wrestlers, and then you'd climb on the turnbuckle, you know, get in trouble because, you know, the boxing coach is like, what the heck, this is not wrestling. I can tell you, I completely agree with you. It's an amazing feeling, you know, just to like make believe and be in the ring. So I can just imagine you.
I mean, and just as boxing, just the first time you step through that ring, it really is a magical feeling. Like it's like that, you know, the Field of Dreams game, you know, it was last week, but just like stepping on, like from the cornfield on, like, you know, it's almost like, am I allowed in here? Like you really do, like it's almost like breaking into another world, and so to speak. It's a special thing.
Oh, it's amazing. You know, well, speaking of which, is like when, you know, you start looking, you know, as a fan, you go to these conventions and you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. And then you start to become behind the scenes, either because you're helping somebody with a table, or you're press at the event, and you're beginning to see things that you weren't seeing before. Those moments are like breathtaking, because, you know, now you're seeing what you were seeing before, but from a whole different place.
Yeah, and even on your shoes, I'm sure you've had like experiences with people that you were like, wow, I can't believe I'm having a conversation with this person. Like, how did I get so lucky? And, you know, that's like the best part about what we do in our, you know, our fields. It really is kind of amazing, like the opportunities that kind of come your way that you weren't expecting. And that's like the fun of it all. Like being able to like have those private moments with like somebody you admire like that.
Oh my God, it is amazing. I remember for the last New York Comic Con, I was helping out the guy from Headlock Comics. You know, I was helping him out, and I was able to get in. And at the table, they have freaking Sergeant Slaughter, and dude, I was like, Sergeant Slaughter is right there. Holy shit. You know what I'm saying? You know, that was one of those moments where you're like, you know, especially an 80s kid, as I was, you know, the freaking G.I. Joe.
I was just about to say that. You know, it wasn't just wrestling, it was G.I. Joe. Like, yeah. Unbelievable.
It's like, I got the figure, I see the guy. and then they also had Mick Foley there, and it was such an experience to like actually see these people. And it's so funny because you get like an idea of how, you know, these people are, and then when you meet them, they're like this really nice guy, and you're like, oh, okay. It's such a mind blower.
Yeah, that was something that I was definitely blessed by. The school I joined up, I think it was like, it had to be either the first week or second week. Matt Stryker came down, who was a WWE wrestler at the time. Now he's a commentator and for Impact Wrestling. And I was just like, oh my God, Matt Stryker's here. And it was like, you know, one of those like, oh my gosh things. And then getting to meet Ryder and Hawkins eventually. And like Mikey was somebody I was intimidated by. And then like, the more you're around wrestling and wrestlers, like, you know, some of your friends go up to do bigger and better things. And you kind of just realize we're all people. And the more you act like a normal human being, the better off you are. Unfortunately, I'm very socially awkward, but, you know, I always joke, like, people go like, oh, you know, when they first people are like, oh, Kip's a weird guy. But then when they get to know me, it's like, oh, Kip's a weird guy. Like,
I completely understand you because, you know, it's funny because that you say that, you know, and we're both in this field, and I have my social anxieties, and people go, you have what? No, you don't. I'm like, I have my social anxieties. Just because I do what I do doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that I've been able to overcome them and do what I do.
Yeah, it's tough. That's like the hardest thing. It's just, you know, having those moments. But like again, the more you're around like these people, the more comfortable you get, and that's what's been a blessing too. Like knowing people on the indie level, then when they get further along, if I get to like go to WB, there's some people there that I know, and it's like, oh hey, it's like catching up with a friend in a sense. And it's like, oh wow, I don't need to be intimidated here. Like, I'm here for a reason, and that's like that. I think that's like been my favorite part about wrestling at times, like going someplace and then in the back of my head being like, wait, I'm here for a reason, and I was wanted to be here. And that's like same thing for you. Like, you're probably like if you're helping out at Comic-Con, but you're around some like important people, it's just like, oh wow, but wait, I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah, I'm doing something. I completely understand what you're saying, because that does change everything. It's like I'm supposed to be here. I'm doing something, and that something is why I'm here.
Yeah, and we're all just human beings.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And the more I do this, the more I see that. The more you meet people, and you're like, oh, you're just a regular nice person. Some not all the time, but most of the time, you're a regular nice person.
We all have our moments, and I'm sure I've had too.
Oh man, yeah, because there's times you meet up with some people, and stuff happens.
But again, that's it. But I always say this, it takes a lifetime to gain a fan, but it takes only a few seconds to lose a fan.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's happened a couple times to me, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't know you were.
Ron James Dio was always like, give somebody that moment. Like they're meeting you, give them that moment, because you're going to forget it, but they're never going to forget it.
Exactly.
So it takes nothing to just be like, sure, man, we'll take a picture, So it goes a long way.
It definitely does, because I think a lot of us forget sometimes that certain people, when they meet you, they're like, oh, you're so and so. You may be like, yeah, so, but that's what they're happy that moment because they're meeting somebody they want to meet. They're meeting somebody they want to talk to. They're meeting somebody, and I feel like a lot of people just forget that sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, we all have like our bad days and stuff, but sometimes you just gotta like take that step back. And again, and on the other hand, too, if you're meeting somebody important, like. If you see they're a little stressed, hey, maybe take the L on this one. Just give them a moment, give them the space. You can always find an opportunity when it's a little bit more appropriate.
And I've seen that too. I've seen when fans don't understand certain things. I'm like, dude, relax. You can see that person's having a bad day. Oh, so I mean, what do you mean? So they're having a bad. If you were having a bad day and I came and slapped you in the back of the head, how would you feel?
Yeah. Yeah. No slapping me on the back of the head ever.
Yeah, but people do all that stuff. Like nobody's supposed to get upset.
Yeah, I've seen some weird things at conventions too. It would be lines like for people to meet like Brian Michael Bendis, who I think is a great writer. Yeah. But they wouldn't even interact. They just put their books there and just expect them to be signed and then walk away. And I'm like, what? You're in front of like an amazing writer. Like, it takes nothing to like, be nice to him and try and engage him in a conversation. If he's rude to you, that's one thing. But like, I can tell you, like a lot of times at the conventions, like I think people were refreshed that I was genuinely happy to meet them and just tell them how much I love their work.
Yeah. And that's another thing. The more I do this, the more I see this. You run into people like Claremont, and they're appreciative that you're actually a fan, that you remember their stuff, that you're talking about stuff that most people aren't talking about, especially when you're a fan. Yeah.
And I'm sure with somebody like Chris Claremont, like back in the day, the comic book industry wasn't looked upon like it is now. Like it was just kind of like, a rag, so to speak. And to think that their work meant something to like these people and they're appreciative of it and it's lasting on. And like, the older they get, they probably realize like, I'm going to be dead, but my work is going to live on. Like that's incredibly, flattering, I would imagine. And it's nice to get that little reminder.
It is. And sometimes what ends up happening, because I feel like we see the industry, all the industries in a certain way. And we forget that, these people, we forget that people in general, like, as time progresses, they're still there, but they're probably not doing as much work as they were doing before. but it's good for for you to go up and go, dude, Peter David, man, your book was amazing, or Chris, I loved your run on the X-Men. Sometimes it's as easy as that to make somebody's day.
Yeah, and they know how awesome they were. Yeah, I'm sure Claremont knows his run on the X-Men was awesome, and he probably never gets tired of hearing it, nor should he, for that matter.
Oh man, I don't get tired of talking about it. So, that's the whole nerd culture we do. We're like, wow, that Claremont run was amazing. But as nerds, there's this whole toxic nerd aspect of things. And sometimes they get a little vicious.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. And again, like I was wondering, wrestling fandom too. Like, the one thing I remember, like people saying, "Oh, you owe us this," and like some wrestlers would be like, "I'm at the gym right now getting a workout on." Like, I owe you to stop everything to take a photo with you. Like, it's a weird thing. There is like, it's funny how I always say like the comics culture and like the wrestling culture have so much in common.
They
so
definitely do. Mm-hmm.
And like not just again, and even just the stuff behind the scenes is always fascinating, and like what we put out to people, it really is, and it's crazy how it's like the same way. Or I see a lot of similar things with like where wrestling fans will complain about storylines, but I'll see the same thing with like comic fans about shows or movies or things like that. Like, because you had this expectation built up and it didn't meet your expectations, so that means it's bad. It's like, wait, hold on, but whatever happened to just enjoying the ride? And like, yeah, it might not have been the best thing, but still like, okay, but that was what they decided to go with. Not this is what they needed to do for the integrity of the character. Like,
I think, I completely agree with you. I feel like, that's where we've gotten to this point of, well, no, you guys needed to do it my way, and that's the way it needed to be done. And a lot of people, like, I feel like before people would just enjoy the ride. Now it feels like, no, you need to do it my way, and I need to put my input in this because I'm important.
Do you think social media is the big reason with that? Now that everybody has a voice, now they want their voice to be the loudest in the room?
It's funny that you say that because I feel like it's the same concept of bullying. Bullying has gotten worse now that social media is around because you can do whatever you want and not show your face and not get in trouble for it pretty much because, you're behind the keyboard and nobody sees who you are or what you're doing. So it's easy to bully anybody.
Yeah, that's just a shame.
That's definitely a shame, and I feel like we, just because you have the ability to get your voice heard doesn't mean that you need to be an asshole.
Yeah, it takes no effort. If you could be anything in the world, be kind.
Yeah, exactly. And the best thing to do, especially, and I say, and I believe it, and I would say it all the time, and I know Jay and the rest of us believe it, is that we raise each other up. It's the best way to live life is raise each other up. We'll all get somewhere and we'll all be in the same place, and we'll all get our creative things seen, especially if we're taking care of each other.
Yeah, there's this thing in wrestling, like New York is the worst with this, like my spot. Like, no, like you trust me, it takes nothing to help somebody else up. If you're a good person, your spot's fine. No one's coming to take your spot. It's so funny at times with that. And then there's a wrestler who like loves to quote me on this, and I stole this quote. I always say it's the happy bus. Like, I'm always riding the happy bus. I've been to shows where I see people come in and they're miserable, and I'm like, no one forced you to be a wrestler. Nobody forced you to do this. Like, I'm here and I'm happy to be here. It's awesome. And like, that's where you say, like, we're all looking to just help each other up. Like, I'd much rather be known for somebody who like helped other people through their matches, did good stuff, as opposed to somebody who went to a promoter and said like, oh, I would never use this guy. Like, it's like drinking poison that way.
Yeah. And life is much better when we're actually helping each other out, when we're taking care of our brothers and sisters, and I feel like the world is beginning to lose that more and more. You have people who call themselves good, but the first chance they get a chance to do good, they don't do good.
Oh, it's a shame.
And And it's funny because the world's become a book, a really bad book.
Well, this is
book.
Well, this is where we're going to talk about the writers. We get to write it. Maybe we can start changing some of these pages.
That's what I try to do. I try to like in the stuff that I write. There's always I have certain issues, of course, every writer does, and they work themselves into your writing or to your art, whatever you want to call it. But besides that, I try to like give hope. You know, I understand some people like those stories where everything ends badly, and like, okay, and I'm like, but I've always been like, okay, that was interesting. It was good entertainment, but I don't think I wanted to end up where we ended up. I didn't like that.
There's nothing wrong with a happy ending. Just throwing that out there.
And I find that people get more and more upset at happy endings now.
So this is where I'm not trying to be negative, but one thing I didn't like about when Zack Snyder was doing Superman is how dark he made Superman. And I was always just like, there's nothing wrong with Superman being like the ultimate good guy. Like, I always joke like, and I always hate when it's like, oh, we have to put a dark spin on this character. No, you don't. You know, it's sometimes like you just need that. No, this is your ideal right there, and there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean that he's.
I was gonna say I always say the same thing, that I feel like it's easier to write those type of characters because you don't have to keep the goodness of the character. You don't have to keep the pureness of the character, which is a little more difficult to write.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I always made the joke like, everyone's like, "Oh, Superman lame." I'm like, dude, if you're falling out of a building, you want Superman to save you. You don't want the Batman with issues. You don't want the Green Lantern who might go snap one day and blow up your city. No, you want the hero of heroes to save you in that moment. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Either or Spider-Man gives you that one because everybody gets one. Oh man. So I see we are at the end of our show, which is see how time flies?
It does fly.
So if you had your final word to say to the audience, what would that final word be?
Man, I wish I was more inspirational. But I guess if there's anything that's been kind of a theme in this conversation, it's just whatever you want to do, go for it. Just go for it. Fail. Go ahead and fail. It'll be awesome when you do. Trust me. And I think the last thing I talked about is like, hey, if you're going to be anything in the world, be kind. Just do that. Ride the happy bus. You'll enjoy things a lot more that way.
I think you're very inspirational. I love your story. I think it's very inspirational. I think the fact that you just keep moving forward, you keep fighting the good fight. That's the kind of people we need right now, because we want to see that somebody else is out there fighting the fight that we're fighting. Every day we're trying to make ourselves better. We're trying to make our situations better. And the whole point of life is to keep moving forward, to live it, to enjoy it. To do what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on to share some of my story. And again, I didn't think the show was going to be so inspirational. It was just me talking. But, if somebody somewhere along the way heard it and was inspired by it, that's really cool and flattering. And if nobody was inspired by it, I'll try and do better the next time.
There you go. That's what we do. Try to do better the next time. So here's the last thing. Where can they find you? Where can they look you up? Where can they, as I show your Instagram page over here, you can give me the information.
So on the Twitter and the Instagram, I'm at Francis Kip STVNS. On Facebook, Francis Kip Stevens. I'm not going to lie to you. I am very boring on social media. That's something that I would love to get better at, is my social media game. But here's the thing. I work my butt off for 9 hours a day. Then I go to the gym. When I get home, I'm tired. And I'm not looking to put my thoughts about how horrible my dinner was on there. I'd much rather put something positive. And then on top of it, I'm just too lazy. But please follow me on there. And I'm really great at interacting. So if you do send me a DM or a message, I will respond. I I wish I had a pro wrestling tease. Again, too lazy, but please come to any of my shows. Come to my merch table. Tell me you heard me on the Written Writs, and then I will engage you in a great conversation about writing and our thought process. And then you can buy one of my T-shirts, and I will be forever your friend. Or if I'm Evil Kip, I'll be forever your enemy. But it's okay because at least you'll be in on the joke.
Oh my God, you are a blast. I love when we meet up at the conventions. It is so much fun. Some of the times I can't even use half the stuff we film because it just gets that crazy.
Yes,
and it's always
and I plan on adding to some of the craziness next time I see you, because we're out of quarantine, we're free. Let's do it.
Exactly.
Well, I should say free for now. Hopefully for the foreseeable future, but who knows?
I think one of my favorite things to do is put you on the camera and go do your wrestling promo thing.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, I'm usually very tired on those days, and there's not enough coffee in the world on those days. So, hopefully you get me at the right caffeine moments when
you've been, every time I put you on camera, you've been on the money. So
we'll keep it up.
All right, guys, this has been the Written Writ with Written Writ Ralph and Francis Kip Stevens. I hope you have enjoyed the show today. And as usual, what we're going to do is, as I press this button over here,